There's a lot to talk about. It's all good though. I mean, it's so good.
Yeah.
So yeah, usual start off. Starting lineup, which we could probably talk for like half an hour on.
Yeah.
We won't, but we probably could. Passing network a little bit, which was incredibly disjointed. A little bit on XGs and stats, and then just going into most of the game flow. I've got. Did you have any other moments you wanted to talk about besides the stuff that I have in here? Some of the big chances in the first, obviously the game changing stuff in the second.
Only two shots. Yeah, just that right after Klaus, Leuven, and AC came, right away we started creating some opportunities. So we can talk about that. I have
Yeah.
some notes on that.
Okay. Yeah. I figured we'd spend most of the time in the second half because that's
Yeah.
when it was. Yeah. We'll talk about it, but it was basically a whole lot of keeping pace in the first half and then
Yeah.
kicking into gear in the second.
Yep.
All right. Cool. All right. I'm gonna bring us in for the pod part. You ready?
Yep.
Welcome everyone to Flyover Fallout. My name is Matt Baker, here joined as always with Santiago Beltran, and it's a good day, St. Louis. We're here to recap the 2-1 win, St. Louis City over Minnesota United FC Saturday night. Santi, let's just jump into it. I'm on cloud nine. I'm still here in Minnesota as we're recording this, and things couldn't be better right now. How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm a little jealous because you got to see the game live.
Well, it almost didn't happen. We were worried going into it that we'd have another situation like FC Cincinnati, Columbus, FC Dallas, God forbid. But the game was played. It was really wet. It was raining, but thankfully the weather gods were shining. The soccer gods were pleased with ourselves, and they gave us rain, and that's all. And I will take rain all day, every day, if it means we can get these matches in, and if it means our team performs like they ended up performing on Saturday night, because that was a performance.
Yeah, I was keeping an eye on the forecast, and it looked like there was gonna be some lighting, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, this is gonna be a long night," and we weren't sure if we should start the pregame show, but at the end, we went with it, and the game happened as scheduled. So that's great.
Yeah, let's jump into it because we have a lot to talk about. We're probably going to spend a lot of time on that second half because that's when all the excitement really happened. But there were a lot of thoughts going on with this starting 11. Roman Berkey, Kyle Hebert, John Bell, Josh Yarrow, Jake Nerwinski, Indiana Vasilev, Jabulu Blom, Celio Pompeu, Tomas Ostrak, Jared Stroud, and Nico Gioacchini. Santi, what were your first thoughts? Let me get your first thoughts on this lineup when you saw it.
So when I saw it, I got some San Jose Earthquakes vibes, like when we played San Jose back in June, and the team had a few games where it wasn't getting results. There were a few changes to the lineup, so that's the first thing I thought. I was like, oh, maybe do some rotation for a change. Yeah, some guys need to rest, but giving opportunities to some of these other guys may bring a spark to the team, and maybe it will be good. But at the same time, I was a little bit concerned. Like, yeah, the team already qualified for the playoffs, but continuing getting results is important. So I was a little bit concerned, but at the same time, I have some hopes.
I think that's why I was so optimistic going into this lineup because I've seen it time and again this year where the San Jose Earthquakes game is the perfect example. You do rotate and you do it intentionally with the depth that we have, but you run it out in a sense of what works against the style your opponent is trying to play. And Bradley Carnell mentioned last week that Minnesota at home is different than Minnesota away.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you felt the same. I felt it was a vastly different offensive team as well as defensively from Minnesota throughout.
Yeah, definitely a different team. They play different at home. One more thing about the lineup. One concern I had is that there wasn't any Joachim Nilsson or Tim Parker on the bench. So I was a little
Mhm.
bit concerned. What if somebody gets injured, we don't have a back at center back. But at the same time, I saw Kyle Heber playing as left back, so I was like, if something happens, he will slide into center back, and that would be the way to find a replacement if needed. And that ended up happening at the end. And the other thing that was a little bit surprising was seeing Jabulo Blom in the starting lineup, because he came out early on Wednesday's game, and there were some concerns about I think it was a foot issue or a leg
Yeah.
issue that Carnell mentioned. But it was at the same time, it was good to see him in the starting lineup. That meant he was doing okay, and at the end of the night, he ended up making the difference.
Yeah, and our predictions, I think, last week came true in the sense of rotation, but the personnel in the rotation was different. It was surprising to see Blom in there. Definitely a pleasant surprise because it seemed like the foot issue wasn't a deal at all. Whatever ended up happening last week, as far as the issue itself, the medication, the stomach issues that he had that caused him to come out, seems to be resolved, which is fantastic to know that's not going to be an ongoing issue we can expect. And then, yeah, Nilsson and Parker kind of took away some of that center back depth that Bradley Carnell liked to tout going into this match. He was very explicit in his comments last week about our center back depth and that being a strength of the team. So removing that was an interesting factor, especially when you start really all three of our center backs in Hebert, Bell, and Yarrow. So knowing that we didn't have to deal with injuries for them, everything was going really well. John Bell comes off and we're able to move Hebert in the left back depth. And you're kind of seeing this like cascade effect, I feel, where the depth in different parts of the formations and the lineups can cover for other areas where you don't need four center backs on your game day roster to be effective. You can start with three and then move them around as you need to. One thing I was watching the replay again on Sunday morning, and I liked how they referred to our MLS Next Pro left side with Celio Pompeu, with Kyle Hebert, and Josh Yarrow back there as well. You know, that kind of furthers the storyline throughout this year of our ability to find talent, develop them, and then progress them on. I love that is a continuing storyline in wins, because I harken back to the San Jose game where you have the same kind of story where you're looking at AZ Jackson, Josh Yarrow, Akil Watts, Sam Adeniran all starting in that game, and you're highlighting the same kinds of things. And so to see this rotation where you bring those guys back in, Salio, you have Kyle back in, but you also have Jake Nerwinski starting again, who seems to be finding his form really well. And we're going to talk about him as one of the top players later. But it was really good to see him. It was really good to see Ostrak have some good opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. Overall, all the guys play well. Obviously, we're gonna talk a little bit more about the second half,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, not a lot of chances on the first half. So even though the
Yeah.
team was controlling what Minnesota was doing on the first half, not a lot, not a lot happening on that first half. A couple of opportunities with Celio and with Ostrak and with Stroud, but not much on the first half.
One thing I do want to say also is Rasmus Alm was on the bench. That's a
Yeah,
positive.
that was positive too.
Yeah, didn't need to see minutes, so that's good. But it's good that he was able to go. So that's going to be a storyline we follow as well, along with the health and of Nielsen and making sure there's no issues long term with him. Is Rasmus Alm returned to the game day roster? Happy to see that. Hopefully, he'll be progressing to either see minutes or start or whatever that may be against Sporting Kansas City. But Santi, this match I thought was another tale of two halves, and we're going to get into why it changed in the second half. But to start it off, it felt like Minnesota was controlling the ball wide. We were having success kind of owning the midfield, and I felt that the ball was being played through the width on both teams, and it was kind of effective by Minnesota. We created a few chances in the first half, but if you look at the passing network, it looks as wide as it felt. And you have Celio Pompeu, Jake Nerwinski, Jared Stroud, both very wide left and rights, respectively. But you also have some disconnection there between Blom and Vasilev. They are a little higher up the field than I would have expected from our center backs, and I do wonder if that kind of speaks to the difference in center back styles. So you're having John Bell with Josh Yarrow back there as opposed to Tim Parker or Joachim Nilsson, who are more we're more familiar with how they distribute the ball. And it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of distribution from John Bell outside of Indiana Vasilev. He used him as his outlet on the left side. Kyle Hebert, Jake Nerwinski progressing the ball pretty effectively on the wings at times, but none of that really got anywhere. You look at the possession that really skewed where St. Louis wanted it to in a less than 50%. You look at some of the XG numbers that weren't very high, but I would say that there were, to me, a couple opportunities in the first half. Did you see anything, I guess, noteworthy in the first half as far as our offensive production?
No, so I was saying just a couple of chances. The one chance that Celio had was a great play, but by Thomas Ostrak.
Yep.
That was good to see. Too bad at the end. He didn't have a good shot, and he also had a chance to pass it to the right to Nico, but in the end ended up shooting, and St. Clair was there. But other than that, not much offense on the first half.
I do wonder if the second half hadn't gone the way it did, if that moment in the 24th minute would have been looked upon very much more critically or more harsh, because it did remind me, to your point there, of a few times in the second half last week against LAFC where there were feelings of some of our attackers taking their own shots as opposed to laying it off or playing it to some of their teammates. And that was somewhat of a moment, even though I think Ostrak had a pretty clear vision to goal with his opportunity on the rebound, let alone what Salio did. But that's one of the two chances I think we had in the first half. And so I wanted to call him out real quick before we move on to the fun stuff. Is in the 20th minute, especially, Nico Gioacchini really kind of drawing a yellow on Dane St. Clair, where Nico Gioacchini had a really nice chance on the left side. It was a ball that was blocked away by Berkey, played to Indiana Vasilev. The give and go that Indy and Salio had on the left was fun to watch before Indy, and they're kind of drawing the defense into the midfield, right? They're kind of passing back and forth. And that's something that I think doesn't get a lot of credit for St. Louis City, is the way that we're able to have some of these short passes to draw in defenders, and that helps stretch the field for our attackers. And it worked with Nico getting wide left. Dane St. Clair just came all the way out of his box to our left side, cleared the ball, and then cleared it again after play was getting ready to restart from Nico, because he was so far out of position. And if he hadn't kicked the ball away, earning himself a yellow card, it's very much likely that Jared Stroud would have found some kind of shot on goal. We might have even gone over defensive heads, and that could have been a really nice opportunity. And then the 24th minute was the only other chance I saw in the first half that was significant. And this was nice because Berkey played it out to Blom out of the back. Blom was on the left side, and he was acting in kind of a left back type role, not in defensive shape or anything, but just his positioning on the field. And that's because we had players so high up the field on the left, with Hebert and Nerwinski on the other side, pushing high. And then Blom was able to just send it long to Tomas Ostrak. Ostrak recovered it beautifully in the attacking penalty box, carried it centrally, laid it back for Celio Pompeu, whose shot was blocked, and then it fell back to Ostrak, who sent it wide. Other than those two chances, I think, Santi, we can probably move into the second half, which, going into the second half, I don't know how you felt just watching it on the broadcast, but there was definitely feelings of we feel like we're playing for a draw in a lot of these moments. And we feel like we need some kind of spark, because the first half, it was very much an even contest. We had 6 shots, they had 7. We had 0.78 XG, they had 0.85. We had a few big chances, they had a few big chances. It just seemed like a dogfight, and it was pouring rain during all of this. So I think that's important to note too, is just the weather conditions and how it was a very nasty matchup going on in the field as the second half began. So what did you see at halftime and then going into the second half?
Yeah, so definitely very difficult conditions, and you could see that at the beginning of the first half that like balls were going longer than guys would expect, and it took the team a few minutes to get used to it. Although it continued struggling with that, but going to the second half, yeah, I agree with you. I was thinking, yeah, if nothing happens, this will be. Maybe a tie, or could be one of those that Minnesota will get a chance and they will score, and that will be a game. And I was thinking at halftime, it's funny because I mentioned it to Hector on the broadcast. I was like, I bet that around the 60th minute we're gonna see some substitutions, and Leuven, Klaus, and AC Jackson are gonna come in. And then it was
Did
a
you
little
really?
before that. I did, yeah. I want to go back and look for the audio, but yeah, I remember mentioning
Oh,
that to
that's
him.
great. That's perfect. I love that. And you almost had it down to the minute too.
Yeah, very close.
Yeah, but the thing that really got me about the subs is Carnell didn't wait. And this was another instance to start the second half where, yes, they scored quickly. Yes, it changed the flow. Who knows if Bradley Carnell was intending to make those three subs and he just decided to make them at that certain point because of the game flow. But to start the second half, it's one of those moments where it could have gone vastly different because this is one of those three or so moments that we always talk about that is game changing in the sense that it dictates the tone for significant amounts of time in the game. So you have the beginning of the game, obviously, you have right before half, and then you have right after halftime. You can look at some of the sub moments as if they're made properly, they can change the game, and I think we saw that. But Minnesota coming out as strong as they did in the first half, and it wasn't even necessarily overly strong. I think in the run of play, it was just the weather also contributing to the fact, but they did put the ball in a very dangerous part of the field in 47 minutes. They had a set piece from their right side. When they sent it in, Hogwane won a header, kept the ball in the box, and Berkey goes after it, but he's not able to secure it on his first touch. And when he didn't secure it on the first touch, it seemed like things were getting a little chippy as far as in the moment. And he goes to grab it and ends up grabbing Hassani Dodson from behind, just briefly, but briefly enough to earn the call, earn the yellow, and draw the PK that's finished by Timu Puki. And it's not, I don't think it's one of those you can argue really that Berkey didn't deserve a yellow. I saw even some comments that there was some calls for a straight red from
Really?
what he did there. Yeah, a denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity. I don't know that I completely disagree. I just didn't give that enough thought to even see if Dodson had an obvious goal scoring opportunity with where the ball was placed.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody can argue with the yellow, and that's something that you just have to hang your hat on. That it's kind of weather related. Berkey didn't have a good grip on it, and it's unfortunate that changed the tone for a period of time. Did you see anything wrong with the yellow or wrong with the call?
No, no, it was to me at least what I saw. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a foul, and he deserved the yellow. But that's also also shows how difficult the wet field was, and that's why he couldn't collect that ball. And at the end, he ended up grabbing Dodson. But yeah, early in the second half, you start thinking, okay, another PK. Minnesota, two goals, two PKs, and I was thinking, is this gonna be it? Like Minnesota is gonna beat us with two PKs without doing a lot. But thankfully, the substitutions came. I wanted to ask. So go ahead. You may have something to say, but I'm going to interrupt you probably in a couple of minutes.
Okay. Well, so the first thing that I saw in the 58th minute when we brought in the subs is it was Bradley Carnell being proactive with his subs. This is something that we've called for and we've just pleaded for weeks, for months, is that don't let your second half substitutions be reactive, be proactive, especially when you need to come from behind. So there's a lot of things that play into this for me, and one of them is Bradley Carnell's insistence that especially earlier in the season that he doesn't play for ties. And I think this is what led to 27 games, two draws, is that if we're going to lose or if we're losing, we're going to go all out to try and get that back and keep going. And that's oftentimes what's led to multiple goals scored against us. We had it during Real Salt Lake, during Seattle. When we lose these games by a couple goals or more, it's because we have this mentality of continuing to fight and not settle for a one goal loss or not settling for a draw and continuing that. And over the past few games, I think we've earned our place with our draws, especially away, that we have to be proud of. But what happened at the 58th minute completely changed the game. And you can look at it from a stats perspective. Let me get these two stats in real quick because I saw that there were only two shots on goal in this half for City before these subs were made. Zero during the run of play. It was just two. I think it was a Kyle Hebert and a Nico Joachini header offset pieces. And then we had 8 shots after. So 58 minutes in the second half, there were 2 shots from headers, 0 in the run of play. And then from 58 on, We had 8 shots that were made by this team. AZ Jackson, Klaus, everybody was getting in on it. And the dynamic shifted so massively.
Yeah, definitely made an impact right away. But Matt, on the 55th minute before those substitutions, there was a play in Minnesota's box that looked like a handball. Do you remember that play?
I didn't rewatch it this morning. I remember brief calls for a handball, but how close was it?
To me, it looks like a handball, but I
I
don't
don't
know what
know.
a handball is anymore.
Maybe that's why I didn't make note of it. I'm sick of it, and I don't want to. I didn't want to have that conversation and
Yeah,
make
and
that
I
a
guess it
focal
doesn't
point.
matter because at the end, City ended up winning. But it was just like, oh,
Not
another
again.
close one, not again. But it didn't matter at the end. But yeah, after the subs, like 1 minute into it, City created a chance, and Celio and Klaus participated, and
Hmm.
you can see how valuable Klaus is. Like he held the ball long enough so Nico could run behind, and too bad that Nico didn't shoot it, and then AC didn't shoot it, and he hesitated about passing it to Leuven or Celio, and then Celio didn't have a shot. But right away, 1 minute into it, you could tell, okay,
Oh yeah.
this is a different team.
And they kept on it. So those 8 shots were peppered throughout the half. They didn't come all at once in a couple sequences. And then after that moment you mentioned, Santi, things really happen at 64th minute. And I want to look at this because the second goal is the one that's getting all or nearly all of the praise and highlights because of its historic nature. But 64th minute, St. Louis draws even, and the way that they do it is Klaus from Nerwinski. But there's so much more to that goes into it.
Oh my
Yarrow
god.
recovered the ball, who was cleared away from Minnesota's penalty box. Yarrow passes it centrally to Leuven. Leuven lays it back for Joachini in the middle and then plays it back to Leuven quickly. Leuven progresses it up the midfield just to his left, and then he kind of gets stuck for just a moment. So this is a possession-based attack at this point where Leuven has the ball. He's in the attacking half, and then he plays it back just a little bit. So he's still in the midfield open area. You can see there's Leuven in the middle. There's Klaus to his right. There's Nerwinski on the wing to the right. Leuven pulls it back, plays it wide to the wing to Nerwinski. When Nerwinski gets the ball, watch Klaus. Watch this replay and watch what Klaus does. Immediately makes a beeline for the goal. And not just a beeline for the goal because it's congested in the box. But Nerwinski sends the ball up. And as he sends the ball up for a cross, what Nerwinski clearly does is he sends it up into space. He sees the open space and he just puts the ball there. Klaus sees the open space as he's running and puts himself there to find the ball, heads it home, 1-0. And the sequence itself, from just the way that these players are able to know what each other is going to do and know the right thing to do in each given moment, from Leuven able to pull it back and play it wide to give Nerwinski that opportunity. Maybe Leuven even saw the space himself because it was right in front of him when he pulled the ball back, and so he knew that this was a good opportunity for a cross. All of these things that go on in these players' minds and really inside of what we see is so fascinating to me. And the ability for Klaus to put himself there, the ability for Nerwinski to place the ball there. Those are some of the things that we saw really early in the season, and a reason why Klaus now has 8 goals on the year.
What a run by Klaus. And you just mentioned it before, right when Leuven passed it to Nerwinski, like Klaus, like was within the same distance from the box, and then he makes that big run and ends up finding the ball. The first thing, a couple of minutes after, I was thinking, okay, that run by Klaus just shows that he's back. He's 100%,
Oh
no
yeah.
doubts about that injury that kept him away for a long time. So it was great to see that. Not only that he ended up scoring, but that run just shows that he's 100%.
Mentally and physically.
Yeah.
And Minnesota tried to come back from that. They had a sub just a few minutes later, 71 minutes. They made their first sub to bring in Franco Fragapane, and it definitely didn't go well for them because it was just 2 minutes later that St. Louis continued their offensive outburst. And this is another moment where you can really see what the difference that our subs made, because this 73rd minute goal started from AZ Jackson. AZ wins a duel in midfield, and he begins the sequence overall with a through ball to Klaus. but it was played off by DJ Taylor, the defender from Minnesota. Taylor plays it back to Dane St. Clair, and St. Clair then tries to play it back again to DJ Taylor, playing it out of the back. And it doesn't work well because of Edu Leuven, another one of the subs. Leuven's high pressing. He dispossesses the ball from Taylor, and AZ Jackson is there to clean it up. He comes sprinting seemingly out of nowhere, picks the ball up on the left side, takes the ball to the end line in the left channel, drawing defenders in. Salio's in the box too. And then AZ's pass from the end line in the left channel to the top of the box, where our South African golden boy, Jabulu Blom, receives the ball with his right foot, steps over Michael Boxall, the defender, with his left foot, and then strikes just a perfect shot, top right shelf, 2-1 St. Louis. And Jabulu Blom has his first ever professional goal.
First ever. That's amazing. But yeah, it was a great goal. All I can say about how it happened: press, 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 like St. Louis, like Leuven pressing, AC Jackson pressing,
Yes.
Klaus also pressing St. Clair, so he had to pass it back quickly. It was great to see how the press can result in a moment like that, and just great shot by Jabulo Blom. He had one a few minutes earlier after a
Mm-hmm.
shot from Klaus that he couldn't make good contact, that ended up going to the side. And I remember seeing I was browsing Twitter last night, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody said something about that shot, and then a few minutes later, Jabulo Blom with his first goal. And what an important goal. And not only the goal, he had a great game too.
Oh yeah, and I remember that shot because when it occurred, we were looking up among ourselves in the stands, saying that was Blom that shot that, right? And almost as a harbinger of things to come, what had ended up happening, and that kind of did it. So that was obviously where the game ended 2-1. But watching the last 25 or so, or 15 rather, watching the last 15 was fascinating because you see the tactical battle between Adrian Heath and Bradley Carnell really on full display. You have a 74th minute sub where Anthony Marcanic comes in for John Bell. That sees Kyle Hebert move inside to a center back role, where we alluded to earlier. Then you have Minnesota subbing in Paddleford and Garcia. That changes up their midfield shape. And then at 83 minutes, when you bring in Akil Watts for Nico Gioacchini, you obviously go more defensively. You're knowing where the game's going. You're needing that additional reinforcement. So when Watts comes in for Gioacchini, I liked how we subbed, not just subbed personnel, but changed our shape. And you saw we had that three in the back. We had Hebert, Yarrow, and Nerwinski. And this is something Jake Nerwinski has a lot of experience with from his days in Vancouver, is at a right center back. Now, what Vancouver did wrong is they played him on the left side, but Nerwinski has a lot of experience in three center back roles. I think this is a perfect opportunity to put him on full display of what he's capable of, and also further the fact that the form that Jake Nerwinski is in now is at such a high level, and he's once again in fans' minds of a very viable starting right back role, especially. And there was a comment in the chat of Mark Alaverna mentions Akil Watts was called by Bradley Carnell as a backup for Jabulu Blom at the 6. And so does that open up an opportunity on the right back role? I think we're looking at a similar situation as the San Jose game. And there's a reason why we keep referring back to that. We may refer back to Minnesota in the same way, but it not just highlighted somebody's ability, from Akil Watts to AZ Jackson, Josh Arrow, highlights their ability to play regularly and to start. But Bradley Carnell does like to run with hot hands in these scenarios. And yes, he does like matchup based formations, matchup based lineups, but he also ensures that if a player is playing at a high caliber performance, he's going to consistently earn playtime, both in practice. He gets rewarded in a game, successful in a game, and he keeps going. Could be the same kind of thing with Jake Nerwinski. It'll be interesting to watch how we roll out against Sporting Kansas City next week, seeing how Akil Watts, Jake Nerwinski, and then who subs for who. Are we able to take Jabulu Blom and play him a full 90? Is Watts going to play there? There's a lot of these nuances that are starting to develop in different places that we may had thought were wrapped up by a guy like Akil Watts.
Yeah, but it's great to see that you have that depth at right back, and kudos to Nerwinski, because he played the first 19 games, and then basically Akil Watts took over. But this week during the pregame press conference, he was asked about that, and he was like yeah, like I just put my head down and kept working, waiting for my number to be called. And he mentioned that in that instance, other players may have a different attitude that in the end could hurt their careers. And he said, no, I just kept working and I'm waiting for my chance. And when he got his chance, he took it. So now you have, and Barry Canner talks about this all the time, internal competition. Now you are going to have that internal competition between Nerwinski and Akil Watts.
Bradley Carnell said something post game regarding Joao Klaus that I found fascinating as far as that internal competition and not just who may be performing better individually and in specific roles like defensively. But when he talked about Klaus post game, he mentioned that Klaus needs the supply. He needs the service in, saying we need to turn over the balls, we need to work in transition. So we get Klaus into good situations and he's prepared to do the dirty work for his teammates. So I like the fact that he called out what Jake Nerwinski did and what he's been adept at for most of the season is delivering service. And we saw it earlier in the season with a guy like Johnny Nelson, on the left side delivering service to Klaus before the role kind of reversal there against Kansas City in the first game. But Klaus needs this kind of service, and we can see consistently now Jake Nerwinski is able to deliver that from the right side. Nerwinski's always on the tops of touches and progressive carries when he's in the game. And so he offers a very clear-minded approach from the right side that I really do think benefits Klaus a whole lot.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe depending on the opponent, sometimes we will see Watt, sometimes we will see Nerwinski, but it's great to have a couple of options, especially going into the playoffs.
And sticking with Nerwinski for a minute, one thing that he said post game, and so I talked about what it looked like watching the game and what it looked like on the replay from what Klaus, Leuven, and Nerwinski were doing during that first goal. What Jake Nerwinski said is that when he got the ball, Klaus and him actually made eye contact. Nerwinski
Mm,
says Klaus kind of just pointed to put it in, and Nerwinski said, I trust the guy because he can jump and he can head the ball the best out of any attacker in this league. So I just put it up into a good spot and he put it in. What I would love if there was video from the opposite side where you could see, because Klaus's
right.
back was turned, if you could see him do one of his little points, that would be kind of next level. I would really enjoy that.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of conversation, the kind of almost implicitly knowing your teammate and trusting them that we were talking about.
Yeah, because when I was looking at the replay, I tried to look for some sign of that, but I didn't see anything. So maybe we'll get a different angle. Maybe the video guys from City will have that angle and we'll be able to see it.
Yeah, that's going to be something to watch for on those amazing videos
I,
that City puts together.
I love those.
Yeah, they are fantastic. The other post game thing that I want to say is pivoting a little bit to Jabulu Blom, because he was the player of the game. He was I think a lot, no, most everybody's choice. I think it was like 80% at one point on the app voting for him. Blome had mentioned on the team's mood after falling behind in the second half, because we talked about the game flow, we talked about how the subs can change it, and Blome called it a wake up call because we came back to the changing room after halftime. Coach told us we needed to up our game one more gear, and so after that second half, he said it was kind of a wake up call to lift ourselves up, and that Blome as kind of the centerpiece and what the importance he brings to the team on both sides of the ball. Important that he's calling it that, and he's responding well to the coaching staff, to the players, to some of those leaders on the team coming in and making a difference.
Yeah, he was really not only the goal, but he played really well. The last few games, he had not, at least to me, he had not been in his best form. He
Hmm.
had better games, and I had seen a lot of people complaining about his passing and losing a lot of balls. But yesterday he was back to that Jabulo Blom we know. And when I was rewatching this morning, one of the Spanish broadcaster referred to Blom, talking about Blom. He said, "Está en todas partes," like he's everywhere, and he is like he's all over the field and always recovering the ball. Like if somebody gets beat, right there to recover. Great game by him.
Yeah, and he's where we need to start when we talk about players and some of the stats and highlights. Jubilee Blom, like we said, scored his first goal for City, also his first professional goal, not just in MLS, but in general. Didn't score any goals with Kaiser Chiefs when he played in South Africa. With this goal, Jubilee Blom becomes the 16th different MLS goal scorer for City, tying the team with Charlotte FC for the largest such total by an expansion team in their inaugural year. And that's important for two reasons, not just that we can spread the ball around and score goals, but the volume of goals being scored by those players and the significant difference in standing between us and Charlotte FC. I'm sorry, I just had to get that out there.
You had to do that, right?
I can't, I mean, you have a stat like that. I can't not address the fact that Charlotte's inaugural year was a dumpster fire and we're having the time of our lives.
Yeah, it's been a great year. So now tied with Charlotte. So you have
Yeah.
3 games to get a different goal scorer and just get that record.
Now we got to think of who that's going to be. Maybe that'll be a question for our Thursday stream: is which new goal scorer is going to score in the final 3 games to put us on top over Charlotte in that stat.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll think about it.
If yeah, I'm gonna say Akil Watts.
That would be fun. Reminiscent of some MLS Next Pro goals last year from outside the box, just sending one in.
Yep.
I could get behind that. Blom in this game, though, tied for first in the team with tackles with Celio Pompey with 4, tied for second on the team with Josh Yaro with 3 interceptions. Kyle Hebert led with 4. Blom also led in tackles in the mid and in the defensive third areas. And so I looked at specifically because of your point there about Blom being all over the place and knowing that he led the team in tackles in some of these key areas. It really furthered his role as the sweeper, as the cleaner
Hmm.
in the defensive midfield, just taking care of business and really helping our backline out, providing the stability that we need when we have some backline rotation like that. Because you look at Josh Arrow and Kyle Hebert, who both led the team with clearances. They both had Josh Arrow and Kyle Hebert had double-digit clearances with 12 and 11 respectively. But John Bell also had a fine game at center back. He had a
Yeah.
good game. He did what he needed to do. He protected the ball. He was cohesive with Josh Yarrow. I thought they had a good dynamic, and it really, at least up until his sub, they did what they needed to do. And ultimately, that's really what you want from your center backs. You want them to keep the ball out of dangerous areas inside the box. You want to give Berkey a chance. You don't want to overload him. And I thought they both did a great job.
Yeah, yeah, I like what John Bell did, and you have to think about he hasn't played much, but when he has gotten his opportunity, he has done well. Too bad he couldn't finish the game, but I
Mhm.
like what he did overall during the time he was there.
Yeah, and the other player, I think, shifting to the offensive side a little bit, Klaus. I mean, what more can you say on Klaus? Klaus has scored 3 goals in his last 4 matches now. His injuries behind him mentally and physically, and he is rounded into the form that we really, really hope to see in this playoff push. And he's the difference maker. He's the X factor on the offense. What he does on and off the ball and how his teammates trust him to make these moves and to finish like that. Like that quote from Jake Nerwinski kind of blows my mind in the sense of we have this player on our expansion team. We kind of knew what we hoped to get from him. Nobody else knew him coming into the
Hmm.
season. And what he's been able to provide both to his teammates and to fans has been pretty remarkable. But Santi, I do have to ask. Last week, if anybody was listening to last week's show, they know that we discussed and we took bets on whether Klaus would be able to get 2 double-digit goals. He needed 3 in our last 4 games, I think it was. So we have 3 games left,
Yeah.
right? 3 games left. Klaus has 8 goals. Can he still get to double digits?
Yes, I said yes last time. I'm gonna say yes now. Now he's 2 goals away, 3 games.
Obviously, I'm right there with you. I think he gets it. I think he might even get it against Sporting Kansas City. Wouldn't that be fun?
Ooh, a brace.
That would be pretty great. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Some of the other players to really tout from this game against Minnesota, Jake Nerwinski picked up his second assist of the season. The work he did on the right side was tremendous. AZ Jackson, that other difference maker when he came in to be a sub. And AZ Jackson, besides the work he did on the field, he was the player that when you didn't see him in the starting lineup, everybody was wondering what's going on because he was available at the press conference. We like to use that as
Yeah.
as our indicator, even though they've proved us wrong a few times, but also his history with Minnesota. And so when you don't see him in the starting lineup, you immediately have to think, well, first you check the bench to make sure he's healthy enough to play. when you see him there, you have to think he's going to be a difference maker in the game. He's going to be a sub. He's going to come in. He's going to run all over the pitch. And we saw exactly that, where he recorded his 4th assist of the season, giving him 5 goal contributions on the season with 1 goal and 4 assists. But his work, again, on and off the ball to create and just to add a change of pace to Tomas Ostrak, where I think he provides a lot more of a dynamic energy. Ostrak is fantastic with the ball at his feet. He's fantastic in playmaking. He's a great number 10, but AZ just provides a different level of spark. And the story of AZ Jackson, the myth and the legend continues to build.
Yeah, and it's great to see him doing well against his former team. Back in April, when Minnesota beat City at City Park, he came second half, but wasn't able to make a difference. But it's great to see him now starting, and even though he didn't start yesterday, he ended up with the assistance for that game-winning goal.
I think he has to walk away from this happy and excited for what he was able to show his former team and the coach who was so quick to dismiss him for $150,000 in allocation money. Can't forget that we acquired him for that.
What a
And
steal!
what a steal. Adrian Heath is looking back on that thinking what could have been,
Yeah.
especially with this matchup where their star number 10, Emmanuel Reynoso, was out. Could you imagine the difference in just everything in an alternate timeline where AZ Jackson stays with Minnesota? Reynoso's deals this year happened. He gets a chance to play in spotlight for Minnesota, and they're able to take advantage of everything that we've had this year. It's a testament to what Lutz was able to identify and gather from Minnesota and other clubs we've talked about. But man, those are just some of the things that you just wonder what if, and you're glad that St. Louis is on the side we are right now.
Yeah. Obviously, that shows what a great job Lutz did recruiting and trying to find players that will fit the style, even though they weren't playing with their team, getting a lot of chances. So yeah, it's great to see things like AC, Sam Adeniran, like Nico Joachini. Like
Yeah,
we can probably make a long list. But yeah,
for
it's great
days.
to see. It's great to see AC doing well when he gets the opportunities.
Yeah, that could be an offseason show is the players that Lutz took from others that they undervalued or didn't value, because I think it would probably be the entire team if we're talking
Yeah,
domestically and internationally. But there are some other players and stats that I do want to spotlight, because that was the highlights, the flashiness, right? The subs, the work that Berkey did in net, all those things that were flashy. But there were some other things that I think played into how we got into those opportunities and how we played the game, starting with Salio, Tomas Ostrak, and Indiana Vasilev in some of the stats that they led the team in. Progressive carries, Salio led it with 7. Ostrak had 4, Indy had 2. Ostrak and Indy obviously left at the 58th minute, but progressive carries, carrying the ball up the field and progressing it towards goal, at least 10 yards. They were, and this fits what you remember with Salio, because I remember seeing so many opportunities where he just took the ball and he ran up the field, and then everybody else was kind of trying to create space around him. Shot creating actions. So any action you took that led to a shot, it could be a shot itself, it could be a key pass, it could be a tackle that leads to a shot. Salio had 5, Ostrak, Indy, Blom had 4, Klaus had 3 in his 33 minutes. And so seeing those names pop up, where you mentioned Blom's shot before his goal itself, some of the progressive passes that he had into AZ, into Tomas Ostrak, those led to some of those shot creating actions. Passes into the final third, where you're taking some of our midfielders, our wingers, and seeing who's actually delivering service, who's putting the ball into some of those final third areas that lead to some of these shot creating actions. Indiana Vasilev led the team with 6. Jake Nerwinski, Jabulu Blom, and Edu Leuven all had 4. So you're seeing work come from the midfield, both deep and high with Edu Leuven. You're seeing work come from the right side into the final third. And I mentioned Josh Yarrow and Kyle Hebert with their double-digit clearances. Salio Pompeo also, Salio got a lot of love, deservedly, for his work when he was in the game, playing the full 90. Everything was great, and he had 3 carries into the penalty box that were leading the team, and that's notable because, well, one, that led to a shot in the first half, but also the consistency of carrying the ball into the box as opposed to just delivering service provides another facet of St. Louis's offense that is often overlooked to me. And I see a lot of references, especially nationally, to energy drink soccer, right? And so sending the ball, spray and
Hmm.
play. Well, these kinds of stats where Celio's carrying the ball 3 times into the penalty box disproves that. It shows that
Yeah.
we are talented with the ball at our feet, multiple players. The goal that was scored by Klaus began that kind of way. The goal that was scored by Blom was that way. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this City team can really attack you. But the final thing for Celio is his the amount of time he's carrying the ball. And so not just the number of times carried into the penalty box, not just the number of progressive carries, but distance wise. We don't get full distance information as far as who ran what. The team keeps that pretty tight to themselves, but we do see stats on distances with the ball. And so Celio led the team in total distance and progressive distance with the ball. 187 total yards, progressive total distance rather, 187 total distance, 91 yards progressive distance. And so the difference is total yards carried with the ball and total yards carried with the ball moving towards the goal. Progressive numbers are moving straight towards the goal. These total distances carried are just moving with the ball. So you could be going backwards, you could be going left, right. Celio carrying the ball all over the pitch, being safe and guarded with the ball. The next highest was Indiana Vassilev with 153 total yards. Roman Berkey and Tomas Ostrak were next with 89 and 76 progressive yards. So you see Berkey progressing the ball up just a little bit himself consistently. Not a surprise given his style of play, but this one's Celio to tout. This one in Celio as the ball carrier, as being smart, consistent, and effective carrying the ball.
Yeah, Celio had a great game, and it's great to see that he's back into consideration. He had a stretch of games where he wasn't in the lineup, went and played with City 2 for a few games, and now out of the last 3 games, he had started in two, and he's showing that he deserves to continue getting some minutes. I think he when Nubi Torison was signed, I think the coaching staff obviously wanted to see what Torison could provide, and as part of that, Celio ended up not getting minutes and going back to City 2. But I'm glad he's taking these chances and showing how valuable he is for the team.
That's right. And that's highlighting our depth because Nuke Thorson didn't feature. And I don't think anybody's really thinking about him today, but that's something to keep in mind is that level of talent who's been productive for us and effective in his own right didn't feature, and we still pulled out a win and a pretty good win at that. The club itself has some notable stats that we got to get out there before we go. So with this win, we mentioned the Charlotte stat. City with this win ties LAFC for the most wins by an expansion team in their inaugural season in MLS history, excluding the shootout era, because the Chicago Fire in their inaugural season, I believe, had a few more, but that was the shootout era. LAFC, this would be 16, of course, and so we look to improve on that and take this record for ourselves over the next 3 games. City has extended their unbeaten streak to 4 straight games after a few draws in there. City has recorded their 4th come from behind victory of the season, tying the team with Minnesota United in 2017 and LAFC in 2018 for most victories of that type by an expansion team. And City now has 6 road victories. And this is important. So as we go forward, there has been a notion that St. Louis is not a good road team. And in and of itself, having 5 wins coming into this, I get it. Like, I understand that you look to the stats and you see 10 wins at home, you see 5 wins on the road, you see us drawing recently on the road, and you make the conclusion that we have difficulty playing on the road. We are a subpar team on the road. And my argument against that is context, because MLS, I can't, like, I say it every single week, I feel MLS is a difficult league to win on the
Yeah.
road. It is one of the most difficult leagues in the entire world, statistically speaking, to win on the road. And you look around us at the landscape of not just our conference, but elsewhere as far as road wins go. City was already conference leaders in home wins with 10. They are now, right now, tied with Seattle, Real Salt Lake, and Minnesota themselves for most away wins with 6. We are tied for the lead in our conference in away wins. Think about that compared to the narrative that we heard of City has difficulty winning on the road, and this is a big glaring hole in their style. In fact, let's expand it to MLS. City is the only other team with more away wins in the entire league than City right now is Orlando City with 7. St. Louis, realistically, Santi, I think needs to be in the discussion for one of the best away teams in MLS. And I don't think we get near enough credit for this.
No, we don't even get credit for the whole season. Now, I was um, I was looking at the preview for this game, and remember one of the analysts. It was funny because he had one good thing and then one bad thing. First, he said, "Okay, my vote for coach of the year is gonna be Bradley Carnell." I was like, "Oh, great! Now he's turning around,
Coming around.
getting around that corner." But then he said, "But I'm gonna put an asterisk on their season." And what he said was that after that 5-0 start, City had not been great, and that just made me think. I was like, I'm gonna go back and see how many points City will have and the other teams in the conference. I didn't look at every team, but I look at the first 7. So obviously, City had that 5-0 start, 15 points. So 53 points total. Without
Mm-hmm.
those 15, it will have 38. And I went back and looked at where other teams will be.
Mm-hmm.
LAFC will be at 34. They also had they didn't win their 5 games, but they had 3 wins and 2 ties. So they will be at 34. Seattle Sounders will be at 35. Houston will be at 37. RSL would be at 40. And and since everybody hasn't played the same amount of games,
Right.
points per game, City will be at 1.46, and only Houston at 148, RSL at 1.6, and Vancouver at 1.58 will be better than City. So yeah, like there were some up and downs after that 5-0, but this is MLS, and the team is still hanging and is still in first place.
I saw that, and the notion of trying to I think David Goss said it best on that podcast, Extra Time, is where they talked about what you're referencing, where this was written, that taking out 5 games to start the season, it is the literal cherry picking of all types of stats to
Exactly.
try and prove your point. And for that to even be a notion, the other teams you mentioned, Houston, Vancouver, Real Salt Lake, not a single person is talking about them as the best team in the conference or even in the conversation as the best team in the conference. David Goss's quote in on Extra Time in regards to this being made was, "This feels like you went out to do gymnastics and you came out with the wrong answer." So they tried to find a way to discount by saying, "Oh, the hot start. If it wasn't for that hot start, because form matters now. If it wasn't for the hot start, they wouldn't be anywhere near. We wouldn't be talking about them." Yes, you would. You would still be talking about them. You might not have as many people with able to back up these glaring, amazing things that they're doing, record-setting standings, but they would still be near the top of the table. They would still be competing for home field advantage. All
Yep.
these things. You'd still have to deal with St. Louis City as a good, great expansion team. And this, if anything, proves that yes, it was an amazing start, but even if you discount the start, we're still right there, and we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, and yesterday you said 4 come from behind win. That had not happened since that win against Portland Timbers
Yeah.
back in March. So it had been a while. So I think this is also great for the team to see they can come back in games. And the other thing, the team had not won an away game in a while, also since July 8th.
Yeah, yeah, they'd stocked those up and front loaded on those, and it's good to get back into form again as we're finishing off these last 3 games because now we have 2 home games and 1 away, which seems like Santi a good time to start to get out of here because we've been talking for almost an hour. We could probably talk for a few more if we didn't have things to do, but let's look going forward. Minnesota United, poor Minnesota United, falling to 11th place in the conference, 9-11-10 record. They fall to 3-4-8 at home, below Sporting Kansas City, now 2 points behind FC Dallas for the ninth and final playoff spot. Things are not looking great for them, and they hope to get their star Emmanuel Reynoso back for their playoff push. But we're done with them. We might see them in the playoffs. We're done with them. Let's look inward. St. Louis City remains first in the West now with 53 points on a 16-10-5 record, 16 wins, 10 losses, 5 draws. We improve, like we said, to 6-7-3 away from City Park. We look to go home next week against Sporting Kansas City. We look to cement different things in the playoffs, which that's my go home is yes, now we improve to having 16 wins. We improved to 6 away wins, but we're starting to be able to focus more and more on the playoffs. We know we've clinched the playoffs. We are there. Statistically speaking, we can't fall below Portland or San Jose, but every other playoff team could statistically surpass us. If we go winless, if their schedules fall perfectly, we could end up there. Practically speaking, realistically speaking, the way we like to talk, we feel pretty comfortable. So next week, Santi, next week is going to be massive. And we're gonna cover it all on Flyover Thursday night for our stream and when it comes out on pod later this week. But there's a lot of scenarios that's going to be at play next week. It's going to be fun to talk about them. It's going to be fun to look forward to, especially with a win, because in general, if we win against Sporting Kansas City, we can clinch a top 7 spot. We can clinch a first round matchup. We can clinch home field advantage. And with a win against Sporting Kansas City next Saturday and a loss by LAFC next Sunday, or a draw, I believe we would clinch the conference championship. I think I did the math on that this morning, but it was before I had my coffee, so don't come after me if I'm wrong on that. Moral of the story, the takeaway, next weekend is going to be massive. And it gets to be against Sporting Kansas City at home. Honestly, what more could we ask for?
It's gonna be crazy on Saturday night. Another Clásico between Sporting KC and City, and yeah, City on the verge of making history and possibly clinching first place in the conference, depending on other results. But yeah, Matt, with 53 points, even though mathematically a lot of things have not happened, I think it's safe to say that City will end at least in the top 4.
You heard it here first. I didn't say that. Santi did. Santi, before we get out, I do want to. I don't think we've said this on the pod, but this past week, there was some Twitter polls that went around of different media, different personalities on Twitter in the MLS ecosystem, and you were voted by not just the St. Louis fans but the national fans as the best bilingual analyst in all of MLS. Right?
New.
Okay, best new bilingual analyst. So,
Yeah.
congratulations. I wanted to make sure we got that out here because I often feel I like to say that a lot of our players and our team doesn't get the credit that they deserve nationally or anything. I'm glad to see you getting the credit that you deserve because you're my favorite person to work with. You and Phil and Stu are just the best, and Julian is amazing now. I'm glad he's with us. But Santi, congratulations. You deserve that with your work here, which is amazing. And your work on the broadcasts, your interviews, they're always fantastic. It's an honor and a pleasure to get to talk to you multiple times every week. So congratulations.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's great to see the love from people, and when I saw that, I was traveling during the week, so I was a little bit disconnected. But when I saw it, I was like, I bet St. Louis is gonna do its best thing and vote, and it's appreciated. I appreciate the love from St. Louis, so it's great to be recognized.
Well, again, very well deserved. And that's all the time we have. Do you have anything else for us this week, Santi, or are we good to go celebrate some more?
No, let's keep celebrating.
All right. For Santiago Beltran, my name is Matt Baker. Thanks for joining us on this week's Flyover Fallout to look at our 2-1 win over Minnesota. Let's keep the party going this week and look forward to Sporting Kansas City next week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.
Vamos, City.